Picture the most beautiful street you've ever seen. Now fill it with the grandest doors in the world, 50 feet tall, painted in blues and yellows and deep forest greens, with fan lights above them like frozen fireworks, with iron railings so elegant they look like they were drawn by hand rather than hammered. Now put a beggar on every third step. Add a child with no shoes picking through a pile of horse dung for something to burn. Add the smell of 8,000 bodies living in cellars one street over, the smell layered so deeply into the stone of the place that it doesn't wash out, it just changes character with the seasons. That's Dublin in 1828, the second city of the British Empire. The city with more Georgian architecture than anywhere in Europe outside of London. A place where a lord in a sedan chair can pass within arm's length of a woman dying of fever in a doorway, and the sedan chair doesn't slow, and nobody standing nearby seems to feel that these two facts, the lord, the dying woman, have anything to do with each other. We're going back there tonight. Not to look at the buildings, not to visit the fine assembly rooms and dinner tables where the Protestant ascendancy conduct their elegant social season. We're going to the Liberties of Dublin. The word used to mean something. It meant freedom. The areas outside the old city walls where the guilds operated, where craftsmen had their own rules, their own governance, their own pride. It meant skilled hands and the click of the loom, and a community that kept itself alive by knowing how to make things. That's not what it means in 1828. In 1828, the Liberties means damp. It means 4 families in rooms designed for one. It means handloom weavers who used to earn a living wage sitting in chairs that have become the centre of their days, watching through windows while the world that valued their skill moves somewhere they can't follow. It means rent collectors and turf ash and children coughing in the dark. I make these sleep stories, and I genuinely don't know if anyone actually sleeps to them, or if you're all just people who need to spend an hour somewhere other than your own head. Either way, subscribe if you want. Get comfortable. Because tonight, you're not a tourist. You're not here to admire the fanlight doors or stroll through Trinity College's courtyard and think about history. Tonight, you're a 14-year-old boy named Seamus Brennan, and it is January, and it is cold, and the fire in your room went out 3 hours ago. Here we go. Your eyes open to darkness, complete darkness. Not the comfortable darkness of a room with curtains, the kind of darkness that knows daylight is coming and is simply postponing it. This is the total, wet, pressing darkness of a room with one window whose oilcloth covering has been there so long it's become opaque. A room where daylight doesn't so much enter as apologize at the threshold. You lie still for a moment and take inventory. Cold. That's the first thing, and it's immediate. Not the sharp, clean cold of being outside, but the settled cold of a room that gave up on warmth sometime in the middle of the night. The kind of cold that lives in the walls and the floor and comes up through the straw in the mattress in slow, persistent waves until it reaches your spine and parks itself there. Then the smell. And I want you to understand what I mean when I say the smell, because it's not one smell. It never is. It's damp. The deep, permanent damp of a room that faces a north-facing alley in a building that hasn't been properly mortared since before your father was born. Damp that has worked its way into the plaster and the timber and the very air itself, so that breathing in the morning feels like drinking something thin and grey. It's not a sharp smell. It's an ambient one. You've learned not to notice it the way you've learned not to notice the colour of the walls. Underneath the damp turf ash, the ghost of last night's fire which burned small and died early and left nothing behind except a coating on the back of your throat like felt, like the smell of something that tried and failed. Underneath that, bodies, 4 of them, in 2 rooms that together measure perhaps 12 feet by 20. You know how your own family smells. Your mother's particular mixture of lye soap and whatever she cooked 3 days ago that stays in her clothes regardless of washing. Your father's hands that carry the scent of dye and lanolin even now that he barely works. Your little sister Bridget's hair that smells of nothing at all when you're close to it, which is somehow the saddest thing about her, that 8 years old, and Dublin have not yet given her a smell of anything specific. And underneath all of it, the building, old stone, old timber, the accumulated breath and waste and labour of every family that has lived in these rooms since this house was new, which was 1741, which means it was already 87 years old when your family moved in, and it felt every single one of those years. Welcome to Ash Lane, in the Liberties of Dublin, in January of 1828. You're lying on a straw mattress on the floor of the inner room, under 2 wool blankets and your father's old coat, which smells strongly of him and provides more psychological warmth than actual warmth. Bridget is curled against your back, her small knees tucked into the bend of your legs, her breath hitting the back of your neck at regular intervals like a small warm clock. She's 8 years old and sleeps like a stone in any conditions whatsoever, which is maybe a mercy. From the outer room you can hear your father coughing. Not a new cough. Da has been coughing since November, when the weather turned and the damp settled into his chest with the specific tenacity that the damp of Dublin applies to everything it decides to inhabit. A low, wet cough that comes in fits, 3 or 4 hacks together, the sound of a man's whole body working at something it didn't choose. Then a pause, then silence. You've learned to count the silences. Short silence. He'll cough again. Long silence. He's managed to slide back into sleep. This is a short silence. The cough comes again. It travels through the planking partition like water through old wood. You feel it before you hear it. A vibration in the floor. You ease yourself out from under the blankets without waking Bridget, which takes 5 full minutes of the most careful millimetre by millimetre movement you've developed over a winter of sharing a narrow mattress with an 8-year-old who turns suddenly and without warning like a log in a river. The floor is stone under your bare feet. Cold is not the word. The stone doesn't feel cold. It feels hostile. Like touching it is a mistake your feet are making, a miscalculation they can't correct. Your toes curl involuntarily, your body trying to minimize contact, trying to return to the warmth you've just left. Your clothes are in a pile at the end of the mattress, a shirt of rough linen, grey with washing, woolen trousers that were your father's before they became yours. You've grown into them in the last 6 months, which means in the next 6 months you'll grow out of them, which is a problem you've filed somewhere and not yet looked at. A waistcoat with 2 of the 4 buttons missing, stockings darned so many times in so many different colours that they look like something a child assembled from scraps, which is exactly what they are. You dress quickly. Your hands are clumsy from the cold, your fingers not fully cooperative, fumbling with the buttonhole that still has a button. Through the thin wall, it's not really a wall, it's a partition of old planking that doesn't reach the ceiling, that lets through sound and cold and light in roughly equal measure. You can hear your mother already moving. The scrape of her pot on the stone hearth, the click of the flint, once, twice, 3 times. A tiny bloom of glow through a gap in the planking, orange and brief, then darkness, then the click again. The fire isn't catching. That's going to be the shape of this whole morning. Your mother is kneeling on the stone floor in front of the hearth. She's a small woman. She was probably pretty once, though you find it hard to imagine, not because there's anything wrong with her face, but because prettiness seems to belong to a different category of life than the one she inhabits, a category that has the leisure to be pretty, that isn't spending its energy on other things. She's 41 years old and looks 55. Her hair, dark brown with 2 wide streaks of grey running back from her temples like rivers, is already pinned under her cap despite the hour. Her hands on the flint are steady and methodical. She's tried this before. This morning and other mornings, the fire won't catch because there's almost nothing to catch. A few sods of turf, damp at their edges from the wall they've been stored against, stacked on a thin bed of grey ash. She's trying to get a flame to the straw she's teased out from the broom, and the straw takes. It flares briefly and beautifully, and then it goes out because the turf won't hold the heat. She tries again. Seamus. She doesn't look up. Get the paper from behind the door. There is no paper behind the door. You check anyway, lifting the corner, running your hand along the wall. Nothing. We used the last of it Tuesday, you say. She sits back on her heels, looks at the hearth without expression. This is what experience does to certain people. It removes the visible layer of despair because despair is expensive and you can't spend it fresh every morning on the same problem. She doesn't look upset. She looks like a person who has identified an obstacle and is calculating the route around it. Go see, does Mrs. Daly have anything? Mrs. Daly's across the landing. She's a widow with 6 children and approximately as much paper as you have, but she sometimes has connections to the rag and bone man who sometimes has old newspapers, so there is a chain of possibility and your mother is following it to its end. You cross the landing. You knock. You wait. The door opens. Mrs. Daly in the dress she slept in, with a child on her hip and another one visible behind her, standing in a bucket for reasons you choose not to investigate. Her face is the face of a woman who is already managing something complicated before the day has properly started. Paper, you say, not a question. A need stated plainly, which is the Liberties way. You don't pretend the need away. You don't dress it up. You just say it. She looks at you, reaches behind the door and hands you 3 sheets of newsprint. The Dublin Evening Post. October last year by the date. 4 months old. You'd read it, but the light isn't good enough. Thank you, you say. Your dad's worse, she says. He's the same. She looks at you the way adults look at children when they know they're lying, but the lie is considerate, so they're going to let it stand. Back across the landing. Your mother takes the paper, tears it in strips with quick, experienced movements, rolls the strips tight between her palms, sets them under the damp turf and tries the flint again. This time, on the 4th try, the paper catches. Then the straw catches. Then, slowly and reluctantly, like a man agreeing to something he's already resisted twice, one corner of the bottom sod begins to smoulder. She watches it like it might change its mind. It doesn't. By the time the fire is actually burning, a small, dispirited fire, the kind of fire that heats the air about 2 feet in front of it and has philosophical differences with the rest of the room. Your father has made it from the bed to the chair. The chair is a wooden chair with a padded seat that your mother made from a grain sack stuffed with scraps. It sits 6 inches from the fire when there is a fire, and your father sits in it every morning, and this is the extent of his mornings now. Patrick Brennan is 44 years old. He was a weaver, a good one, a genuinely skilled one. He worked the broad loom, silk and mixed fabrics, the complicated patterns that required years of training and steady hands and a feeling for the weight of thread, for the way tension changes everything, for the particular intelligence that lives in the body of a man who has done one physical thing for long enough that his hands know it before his mind does. He could do things on a loom that lesser weavers couldn't approach. He was proud of that. He's still proud of it, technically, in the way people are proud of skills that no longer earn them anything. The weaving trade in the Liberties has been dying for 20 years. The Act of Union in 1800, that's the event. That's the moment everything began its long, slow tilt. Before 1800, Irish-made fabrics were protected by tariffs. Taxes on imported goods that made the cheaper English product more expensive and the Dublin product competitive. After 1800, those protections were gone. The English mills, powered by steam engines running through the night, running through every night, producing cloth at a rate and a price that a Dublin handloom weaver cannot possibly match. They flooded the market. Workshop after workshop closed. Weavers who had been earning 20 shillings a week in 1790 were earning 5 by 1820, if they were lucky, if they hadn't already pawned their loom. Your father pawned his loom 14 months ago. He got 6 shillings. A loom he'd spent 7 years paying off, through apprenticeship and early journeyman years, and the gradual accumulation of a working life. He stood in the pawnbroker's shop on Meath Street and accepted 6 shillings, and he walked home, and he said nothing about it for 3 days. Now he sits in the chair and coughs. He looks at you when you come in from across the landing, and he looks the way he always looks, like a man quietly measuring the distance between who he is and who he meant to be, doing this arithmetic privately, letting nothing of the result show on his face. "Morning," he says. "Morning, Dar. Cold out. Not gone out yet. Cold, though. Frost on the inside of the window." He nods once, looks at the fire. His hands are resting on his knees, and even in the low light of early morning you can see what they are now. Big hands, a weaver's hands, with thick knuckles that have been swollen since October. There are cracks in the skin across the knuckles that have been open since the cold set in. Your mother puts tallow on them at night. By morning they're cracked again. He's not stupid, your father. He's actually quite clever in ways that the Liberties in 1828 doesn't have much use for. He reads. He reads more than anyone you know outside of the clergy. Pamphlets, old newspapers, whatever comes through Faye's network. He reads O'Connell's speeches when he can get them. He talks politics with Faye from the Catholic Association with an intensity that makes you feel the conversation is doing the work that nothing else can do anymore. But his hands won't work a loom even if there were a loom to work. "I'll go to the docks today," you say. He looks at you. "I'll ask at the coal yard, Clark's yard. They sometimes need boys." "They'll not pay you enough to matter." "They'll pay something." A pause. The fire crackles. Bridget appears in the doorway from the inner room, her hair in 2 loose ropes from yesterday's plaits, her face carrying that specific expression of a child who knows there is a problem but has decided to wait and see what the adults are going to do about it before committing to an emotion. "Steer about," she says. "There's oatmeal," your mother says from the hearth. "Enough for 1 bowl each." There are 4 of you. The arithmetic of that sits in the room for a moment. Half a bowl each, your mother says, without changing her tone. And there's buttermilk in the jug. It'll do you. The stirabout is made with water because the milk is almost gone, and it comes out thin and slightly grey, and taste of the pot it's made in. An iron pot that has been making stirabout since before you were born, and has its own long institutional memory of the process. You eat yours standing near the fire, leaning over the bowl so the steam rises into your face and heats the end of your nose, the only part of you that's still cold. It is not enough. This is the central fact of your mornings, of most of your days. It is never enough. You're 14 and growing, and your body needs more than it gets, and you've learned to eat slowly and think about something else while you eat, which extends the experience without adding to the quantity. You eat, and you watch the fire, and you think about the docks. The coal yards at the quays sometimes use boys to run loads up from the unloading areas, filling Hessian sacks with broken coal and carrying them to the delivery carts. Hard work. The coal dust gets into everything. Your clothes, your eyes, the cracks at the corners of your lips. By the end of a morning you look like you've been carried up a chimney. They pay 3p for a day's work. Sometimes 2p if the foreman is in a mood. 3p buys a penny loaf and some candles and almost enough turf to last 2 days if you're careful, and don't sit too long by the fire and don't let it breathe more than it needs to. These are the calculations of your life. Not abstract calculations, not the kind done with pen and paper. The calculations that live in your body, that you do without language. The way the body knows when it's full and when it isn't, when it's been warm and when it hasn't, when it's safe and when it should be moving faster. Your mother stands at the window with her bowl. Through the tears in the oilcloth you can see strips of grey sky, January sky, the particular January sky that Dublin specialises in, not quite dark, not quite light, the colour of cold water, the colour of the space between things. I'll go to Smithfield, she says, not asking, telling the room what will happen. Mrs. Kiernan will have work, maybe. The stalls need minding. Bridget looks up. Can I come? You're going to school. The negotiation ends there. Your mother doesn't negotiate about school. School is the one thing in Ashlane that has a value that can't be eaten or burned for heat, but that your parents treat as though it can. As though if you stopped going, something irreplaceable would run out. You finish your stirabout, set the bowl on the hearth, start pulling on your coat. Your coat is not really a coat, in the sense that a coat is supposed to fit the person wearing it and be structurally intact. It started life as a coat, probably in 1810, for a man significantly larger and broader than you. Someone sold it or pawned it or left it behind, and it arrived in your family through a sequence of exchanges you don't know, and your mother took it in at the sides and the shoulders and added a button that doesn't match. In cold weather it works. Today is cold weather. At the door, your father speaks. Seamus, you turn. He's looking at the fire, not at you. If they give you trouble at the coal yard, if the foreman tries to short you, he pauses. Don't fight him. Yes, Day. It's not worth it. They can always find another boy. Yes, Day. A pause. His hands on his knees. The fire between you. Come back safe, he says. It's the most frightening thing he could say. It means he's thought about what might not be safe, and thought about it specifically, and found it worth mentioning. You go out. Outside is cold in a way that has texture. Not just the temperature, although the temperature is well below freezing, and your breath is immediately visible, and your ears begin to hurt within 20 seconds of stepping into the air. It's the quality of the cold, the specific Dublin quality of it. The cold that comes off the sea 6 miles east, and off the Liffey 3 streets north, and off the wet stone of the buildings that have absorbed 4 months of rain and can't stop radiating it back. It's not a dry cold. It's a cold with weight and presence, a cold that leans. Ash Lane is about 12 feet wide. It runs between Francis Street to the north and Pimlico to the south, and it contains, at any given moment of the morning, more human activity per square foot than you think should be physically possible in a space this size. To your left, the McCaffrey family are emptying their night waste into the gutter. 3 children and a man you don't recognise doing the work. The gutter runs downhill toward the junction with Francis Street, and if you look down the lane you can see the dark line of it against the frost-whitened stone. To your right, Mrs. Talon is hanging something over her windowsill from the first floor. Whatever it is, it's wet. It drips onto the cobbles below with a regularity that suggests intention. Above you, 3 floors up, a window opens and someone drops a handful of kitchen scraps. You step back and to the left automatically without thinking, because this is something you've learned without being taught. You step over the gutter and start walking. The smell of the Liberties in January is different from the other seasons. In summer, the smell is thick and overwhelming. Human waste and rotting food and the tanneries on Marrowbone Lane and the dye works on Weaver's Square. The smell so present it has colour, a brownish yellow that sits at the back of your sinuses and stays. In January, the cold compresses it. It doesn't go away. It becomes more concentrated, more intimate. The smell of 1,000 people living in buildings designed for 200, all of them trying to cook and sleep and work and exist. You walk north on Francis Street. Francis Street is one of the main streets of the Liberties, and in the morning it is already full. The market stalls haven't opened yet, but the vendors are setting up. Women with baskets of winter vegetables, men with hand carts, a boy not much older than you pushing a barrow of herrings frozen solid overnight, each one a stiff silver crescent. Their smell cutting through everything else on the street with the authority of something that doesn't ask permission. You know this street by bone and muscle. You know where the cobbles have heaved and left gaps that can turn and ankle if you're moving fast in bad light. You know which doorways overhang the pavement enough to give you 6 inches of dry passage when it rains. You know that the water pump at the Francis Street junction has been frozen solid since Thursday and won't thaw until the frost breaks, which means the women who can't afford the water carriers are walking further every morning with their buckets. A group of men are standing outside a tavern that isn't open yet, just standing in the particular way that men in the Liberties stand in mornings when there's no work to go to, not exactly waiting, not exactly doing nothing, just occupying a position in the world that is slightly preferable to their rooms, slightly less close to the walls. You recognise 2 of them, neighbours, weavers or former weavers, which is what most men in this part of the Liberties are. One of them nods at you as you pass. You nod back. There's a whole language in those nods. The nod from that man means, I see you. I see your father isn't here. I see you're going to find work. I see all of this, and I say nothing else. 'Cause what else is there to say that isn't already understood? You walk east toward the Coombe. The Coombe is the oldest part of the Liberties. The name comes from a Norse word for a small valley, which is what this is, a slight depression in the land that the medieval city built up around. Walking through it in the early morning is like walking through the cross section of a century. buildings from the 1650s lean against buildings from the 1790s, and both lean against buildings that seem to have assembled themselves from whatever was available, sharing walls and chimneys in arrangements that no architect planned and every tenant has learned to live with. The dye works are already running on Weaver's Square. You smell them before you see them, a hot chemical smell, somewhere between vinegar and something metallic that rises over the neighbourhood and sits at the top of your head. The dye vats have been going since before dawn. Men are working in the steam that rises off them, their arms stained to the elbow in whatever colour is running today. Today you can see blue and a dull red, the colours drifting upward into the cold morning air and thinning to nothing a few feet above the roofline. These men still have work, not well paid, not skilled, not in the way the weaving was skilled, but work. Your father used to walk past the dye works on his way to the weaving shed and feel sorry for the dye workers. The dye workers were the bottom rung of the trade, the least skilled, the most dangerous, hands and arms permanently stained, eyes damaged over years from fumes, lungs carrying whatever the vats were boiling. Your father felt sorry for them. Now he sits in the chair. You walk faster. At the junction of the Coombe and New Street, a child is sitting on the step of a building that might be a warehouse, might be a ruin. She's maybe 5 years old. She has no shoes. She has a coat that was made for someone much larger. It goes below her knees, the sleeves folded back 4 times, and she's sitting in it with her knees pulled up inside it, so just her small pale face shows, like a turtle that's decided its shell is fine. She's watching the street go by with an expression of complete calm. You stop. You don't have anything to give her. You know you don't. You've had your stirabout, and your 3 pennies don't exist yet, and you have nothing in your pockets except a twist of string you've been saving for a reason you've forgotten. But you stop anyway, because the calm of her demands acknowledgement. She looks at you. "Where's your ma'am?" you say. She points at the building behind her, a doorway with no door in it. "She's sleeping?" you say. The child looks at you with the eyes of a 5-year-old who has already learned that this question means very little, and that the only answer worth giving is the one that ends the conversation and lets everyone move forward. "Grand," she says. Dublin has a word for that specific kind of fine. Grand. The word that means everything is not grand at all, but you're going to keep moving anyway. You keep moving. By the time you reach the quays, your fingers are completely numb. 20 minutes of walking and the cold has worked through your coat and your shirt and is sitting against your sternum now. A flat pressure like a hand pressed against your chest from the inside. Your ears are past hurting and into something beyond hurt, a distant high sound that's partly the cold and partly the wind off the river. The Liffey is in front of you. I want to be very clear about what the Liffey looks like in January 1828, because if you look at the paintings and engravings of Dublin from this period, and there are many of them because wealthy people like to see their city captured, the Liffey is always presented as a graceful amenity, silver and reflective, the kind of river that sets off a building, the custom house mirrored in it, the Georgian quays running alongside it in orderly stone-faced grandeur. The Liffey in reality is brown. It's brown in the way that water becomes brown when an entire city uses it as its main drain. Everything the gutters carry ends up here. Everything the tanneries discharge. Everything the breweries don't want. Everything the 1,000 back-alley privies trickle downhill toward. The Liffey receives all of it, and the Liffey is not a fast river, not in the middle of the city, and in cold, still weather the smell is, well, the cold helps actually. The cold compresses it. In January the Liffey is merely bad. In July it is a different experience entirely. You walk east along the South Quay. The Custom House is ahead of you. The Custom House is the most beautiful building in Dublin. Not the most imposing, not the most useful. The most beautiful. James Gandon designed it. They finished it in 1791, and it cost £400,000, and it nearly started a riot during construction, because moving the Custom House from the old quayside location meant relocating the entire commercial centre of the city, and the merchants whose business depended on the old location expressed their opinion of this in ways that were not entirely legal. But the building, you come around the curve of the quay and it's there in front of you in the thin January light, and even on a grey morning with frost still on the stones and the river running brown beside it, the Custom House does something to you. It's about 370 feet wide. It has a central dome rising perhaps 70 feet above the roofline, and on top of the dome a statue, Commerce, a woman with arms outstretched, that catches whatever light the morning is offering and throws it back. The building is pale stone gone darker with weather, and the columns across the front are Portland stone, actually white against the grey sky. It means something that you find it beautiful. You're a 14-year-old boy from Ash Lane, walking to the coal yards with numb fingers and thin stirabout still in your stomach. You have no particular reason to find the Custom House beautiful. It was built by people who weren't thinking of you when they built it, in the service of an imperial commercial system that extracts from your neighbourhood considerably more than it puts back. And yet, there it is. You give it 30 seconds. Not more. Can't afford more. Then you walk past it, eastward, toward the coal yards in the maze of warehouses and wharf buildings where the big ships come in. The ships come from Wales and from Newcastle, loaded low in the water, heavy with coal. They moor at the quays and they unload, and the coal goes into the yards, and from the yards it goes to the merchants, and from the merchants it goes up to the houses on Merrion Square and Fitzwilliam Square, where Protestant ascendancy families sit warm through the dark months. Some of it, a tiny fraction, eventually reaches the small fires of the Liberties by a long and expensive journey. Clark's yard is near the bridge. Clark is the foreman, broad, red-faced, somewhere around 50, with a coat that actually fits him. He's standing at the yard gate when you get there. There are 6 other boys already waiting, various ages, various states of cold, all with a specific expression of a person who needs something and is trying not to show how much. Clark looks at you, looks at the group. "How old?" he says to you specifically. 14. "Big enough? Can you carry a 4-stone sack?" "Yes," you say. "This is true in theory." He looks at you for another moment. A calculation being performed, cost against utility. The kind of look your father used to give a new length of thread before committing to it. "Tuppence for the morning," he says. "Threepence from the start," you say. The other boys look at you. One of them looks at you the way you'd look at someone stepping in, front of a moving cart. Clark's expression doesn't change, but something behind his eyes adjusts, a fractional re-evaluation, the look of a man who has been deciding people's worth for decades and has just received new information. "Tuppence and a halfpenny," he says, "and if you argue any more, I'll find someone who doesn't." "Done," you say. The work is this. Coal comes off the ships in baskets lowered by rope from the hold. The baskets are emptied into piles in the yard. Your job is to fill Hessian sacks from the piles and carry the sacks to the delivery cart. The sacks, when full, weigh between 3 and 4 stone. 40 to 50 pounds. You weigh about 80 pounds yourself on a good day. The coal is not in neat pieces. It's broken. Small chunks and grit and coal dust mix together. And when you plunge the iron scoop into the pile, it sends up a black cloud that settles on your coat, your cap, your eyelashes, the wet corners of your mouth. Within 10 minutes you look like you've been marked for something. Within an hour your hands are black to the wrists and there's a fine black grit in the creases of your knuckles and coal dust in the crease between your lips. Your hands, which were numb with cold, are now warm from work. They're also cut. The sharp edges of broken coal are more specific than they look. There's a cut on the pad of your right thumb that opened in the first 5 minutes and won't stop bleeding. Nothing serious, just the cold keeping it open, each gust of river wind hitting the small wet cut like a punishment. You lift, you carry, you stack. The Hessian bites into your right shoulder where the sack rests. 45 pounds on one shoulder compresses your spine in a way you feel in your back teeth, a grinding pressure, your skeleton making its opinions known. Your feet find the rhythm of the yard. Scoop, pack, hoist, walk, tip, return. And your body begins to do what bodies do when they're committed to something, which is find the most efficient version of the motion and repeat it until it becomes automatic. The boy directly to your left is maybe 12, skinny, working with a focused intensity that has something desperate in it. He doesn't look up. Fill, lift, carry, set down. Fill, lift, carry, set down. A machine almost. Or a person who's become very good at being a machine. To your right, an older boy, 16, maybe 17, who has the permanent smell of the coal yard. Coal dust so deep in his skin it lives there now, impossible to separate from him. He works quickly and with an efficiency that comes from having done exactly this motion for a year or 2 years, from his body knowing the weight before the sack is fully loaded. You find your rhythm, fill the scoop, compact the coal slightly so the sack takes more. Lift from the knees. You work this out by watching the older boy, the way his back stays straight, the way the power comes from his legs, not his spine. Settle the sack on your right shoulder. Walk to the cart. Tip. Feel the weight leave your shoulder and feel, briefly, almost weightless. Walk back to the pile. Start again. Your back starts aching somewhere in the second hour. Not a sharp ache, not an injury. The steady complaint of muscles doing something they weren't built for repeatedly, past the point of warming up and into the territory of accumulated resistance. It sets up in the middle of your lower back, a deep warm ache that intensifies with each lift and eases slightly when you're carrying. It'll be with you until tomorrow morning, maybe the morning after. The river wind is constant and has no interest in your coat. Around the 3rd hour it begins to rain. Not a real rain, a Dublin rain. What they call a soft day, which is the most characteristically Irish piece of optimism in the language, because soft in this context means wet, in a diffuse, insidious way that doesn't accumulate into what you'd call drops. It just saturates everything it touches. Your coat is damp through within 15 minutes. The coal dust on your hands becomes coal mud. Your boots, the right one has a crack along the sole that's been letting in water since October. Begin admitting a steady small intake of cold liquid with each step. You keep working. Clark walks through the yard at intervals. He doesn't speak. He watches. His eyes do the accounting. How much moved, how much remains, is the pace adequate? He doesn't praise. When he sees the 12-year-old, boy lifting badly, hunching wrong. He stops and adjusts the boy's posture with a hand on his shoulder. No words. The gesture of a man who has seen enough back injuries to understand the economics of prevention. He adjusts the 12-year-old twice. He doesn't adjust you. Around 10 in the morning, though the clouds have sealed off the light so completely that you're going by internal clock, a woman appears at the yard gate with a pot. Tea. The word goes through the yard as a physical response rather than a sound, a slight lifting of heads, a straightening of backs. She charges a halfpenny a mug. You have nothing until noon. You stand and watch the 12-year-old boy hold his tin mug in both coal-black hands and drink it, and you watch his face do the thing that happens when a cold person receives something hot. A specific small transformation, the body registering it as something that matters. You pick up your scoop and go back to the pile. Clark appears beside you. He's quiet for a moment, watching your form. You've not done this before, he says, not a question. No, you say. Showing, though. A pause. Your doll work the weaving. This is not a guess. In the Liberties, everyone comes from something, and the something is usually a trade that used to exist. He did, you say. A silence. Clark seems to consider something. There's a morning shift most days. You do good today. Come back tomorrow. I can't guarantee it, but most days there's work. He walks away. At noon, he pays you 3 pennies. He's counted the extra halfpenny. He pushes them into your coal-black palm without ceremony, without eye contact. Coins cold and real and solid. Tomorrow, he says. An expectation, not a question. Tomorrow, you say. You walk away from the coal yard with 3 pennies and 2 new blisters, and coal dust so deep in your face you can taste it at the back of your throat. And despite everything, despite the cut thumb and the aching back and the wet boot and the cold, you feel actually quite good. You find your mother at Smithfield. Smithfield is the big market square north of the quays, unusually wide by Dublin standards. Wide in a way that's almost disorienting after the narrow lanes of the Liberties, like stepping into a sentence with more room in it than you're used to. On full market days it holds cattle and horses and produce and used goods, and the particular chaos of a city's commercial life condensed into open air. Today, a cold Tuesday between official market days, it's quieter. But there are still people. Because people always need things, and other people are always willing to sell them. Your mother is at a trestle on the southern side with Mrs. Kiernan, who sells second-hand textiles, old clothes, lengths of fabric, buttons loose in a jar, ribbon that might have been several colours in previous lives and has settled into a general brownish neutrality. Your mother sees you immediately from 40 yards. Mothers have this ability, the ability to locate a specific face in any crowd, and she has it particularly. She notes the state of you, the coal dust, the cut thumb, the general transformation of your coat from its morning condition, without expression. How much, she says when you're close enough. You show her the 3 pennies. She nods once, doesn't touch them. How much for you, you say. 8 pence so far. 11 pence altogether. This is actually not a terrible morning. 11 pence buys bread and turf and still leaves something for tomorrow's specific emergency, because tomorrow always has one. Bridget appears from behind the trestle. She has acquired at some point during the morning a small bruise on her left cheek that wasn't there when you left. I fell, she says before you say anything. Where? You say. By the pump. You look at the bruise. You look at Smithfield. The pump on the north side, yes, slippery and frost. Grand, you say. Grand, she says. You stand there in the thin January market, in the open square with the cold pressing down from the sky, and the coal dust drying on your face and your back still aching, and 11 pence between 4 people. And Bridget reaches up and takes your coal-black hand in her small clean one. She holds it, says nothing else. Some things you don't need words for. Your mother sends you to buy bread. The baker on Capel Street near the bridge, a halfpenny loaf and whatever he'll give you for the second halfpenny, which is heel ends, the cut-off crusts from the morning's loaves, sold cheap before they go stale, pressed into a paper twist. You take the long way back. This is a thing you do sometimes when you have the excuse of an errand. You walk south across Grattan Bridge, old stone, low-arched, the Liffey brown below you close enough to see it move, and then south into the centre of the city, the part that isn't the Liberties. The change is visible within 2 streets. The streets here are wider. They're wider not because they happen to be wider, but because they were made wider, deliberately, by the Wide Streets Commission created in the 1750s. Commissioners with plans and authority and political will, who pulled down old buildings and created new thoroughfares, who designed a second city on top of the first. The old city, narrow and dense and mathematical in the medieval way, pressed against the new city, airy and regular and expensive, and both of them running at the same time in the same place. You walk up Parliament Street. The buildings here are 5 stories tall, brick-faced, with windows calibrated in the Georgian formula. Tall and narrow on the ground floor, slightly shorter on each floor above, the whole facade lightening as it rises. Every door has a fanlight. Every fanlight is different. Some plain semicircles, some with elaborate radiating patterns like sunbursts or spider webs, the lead strips holding pieces of glass together in patterns that took craftsmen days to assemble. The doors are painted. This is the thing about Georgian Dublin that catches you every time, that you've never managed to stop noticing. The doors. Blue and yellow and deep red and forest green and black, and on a side street near the Four Courts, a colour that is almost exactly the colour of midnight. A dark blue so deep it's almost not a colour at all. They're not just decorative. Before the streets had numbers, you found a house by its door. Number 12, Merrion Square. Or the yellow door with the sunburst fanlight, 3rd from the corner. The doors are a system of identity in a city that has more people than it has ways to tell them apart. Servants are moving in and out of the service entrances. The doors at the bottom of the area, steps that lead down to the basement kitchens and laundry rooms. Women mostly, in dark dresses and white caps, carrying things. A woman comes up carrying a bin of ash, the emptied grate from a morning fire. She goes to the back of the building. You think about the ash. In the Liberties, ash is not thrown away. You keep it because ash has uses, for cleaning, for spreading on frozen ground for grip, and on bad weeks, for laying under turf to make it burn more slowly. Here, the ash goes in the bin. You file this. You don't fully understand what to do with it, but you file it. You turn onto Dame Street, the main commercial street. The Bank of Ireland is here. The old Parliament building, actually, the building where the Irish Parliament sat until 1800, when the Act of Union abolished it, and the whole apparatus of Irish legislative governance was folded into Westminster. The British government bought it. The Bank of Ireland bought it from them. Beautiful building, curving stone colonnade, bought and converted within 1 generation. The room where men voted to end Ireland's parliament is now a cash room. Men in good coats moving in and out of offices, barristers in their wigs, the rustle of gowns, merchants moving with the particular speed of people whose time cost money and who know it. They don't see you. This is not a metaphor. You are genuinely not in their field of vision. You're 14, black with coal dust, wearing a coat 3 sizes too large, carrying a paper twist of bread crusts. You are background. You are part of the street the way the cobblestones are part of the street. A man coming out of a banking house nearly walks into you. He registers you at the last possible moment. His eyes make contact with yours for exactly the fraction of a second required to redirect his path. And then he's gone. You watch him go. You think about what your father would say. Dar has a complicated relationship with Dame Street and everything it represents. He gives it its due. He's not stupid about what London controls and why. He's not naive about the mathematics of the thing. But he doesn't give it more than its due. He knows that the arrangements of 1828 are not the arrangements of 1750, and those are not the arrangements of 1650, and the arrangements of 1950 will be different again, even if no one alive today can say how. History moves, Dar says. The question is what you do while it's moving. 2 days later, there is a meeting. The Catholic Association holds meetings constantly. This is their method, their essential political technology. A rolling series of public assemblies, prayer meetings, petitions, speeches, each one feeding the next, building a pressure that's been building since O'Connell founded the association in 1823. The Catholic rent, a penny a month from every Catholic in Ireland who can manage it. The money goes to lawyers, to organisers, to the machinery of a movement that is simultaneously a legal campaign and a statement about the number of people willing to make it. The meeting today is in Francis Street Church, 5 minutes from Ash Lane. Your father can't go. He got up this morning, made it to the chair, and then had a fit of coughing that lasted 20 minutes and left him white and spent with both hands shaking on his knees. Your mother looks at him and looks at you and doesn't say anything, which is how you know she's frightened. Go with Mr. Fay, she says. Tell me what's said. Mr. Fay is the association's local organiser. A thin, serious man of 30 with the energy of someone whose entire personality has been organised around a single purpose. He collects the rent. He knows every family in the Liberties who has a case before the courts, who is owed money from the legal fund, who needs a letter written to a landlord in the formal language that carries weight. He comes by at 2 p.m. Your Dar's not well, he says. He wants to know what's said. Fay looks at you. His dark eyes are always in motion, not nervous but processing, the eyes of someone managing a lot of information at speed. Come on then, he says. The church is full in a way that's different from Mass. 400 people in a space designed for 250, standing in the nave, sitting on every available surface, children raised on shoulders, old men pressed against the walls who have clearly been pressing against walls for decades without complaint. The candles along the nave are lit but barely needed. The body heat of 400 people has warmed the air to something approaching the temperature of a cold room, which is significantly above the temperature of outside. The smell is bread and tallow and wet wool and 400 people's shared breath. A man is speaking near the altar. One of the middle-tier organisers, a man named Brennan, who is no relation to you, and who has a voice like iron being worked, a voice that doesn't need to be loud to carry. He's reading a letter from O'Connell. O'Connell is in London. O'Connell is always in London or travelling to it or from it, because the battle is in Westminster, where the Catholic Relief Bill is being argued again. This year, as it has been argued for decades. And this year the argument is different because the momentum is different, because the organisation in Ireland has reached a scale that London can no longer entirely ignore. He says, Brennan says, and the room changes. 400 breaths held at once, a silence so total that you can hear the candles, that the government cannot hold much longer. He says that every petition, every meeting, every penny of the rent is a stone in the wall. He says, his voice goes formal, reading now, not paraphrasing. Tell the people of the Liberties, tell the people of every lane and court in Ireland that their patience has not been in vain. Tell them that the patience of a people who have waited 700 years for justice can wait one more year. Tell them that the year 1828 will be the year they see the beginning of the end of their oppression. Silence. Then the 400 people exhale all at once. Not cheering. The room is too tired and too cold for cheering. That's not what this is. This is a collective release. 400 people letting out a breath they've been holding, not just for this meeting, but for months, years, generations. The breath of people who have been told for their entire lives and their parents' lives that their religion and their origin make them lesser. That the country they live in belongs to people who don't look like them, don't pray like them, and have the law arranged to prove it. You are 14 years old, and you don't fully understand all the political mechanics, the relief bill's specific provisions, the negotiations between parties in Westminster, the particular pressures O'Connell is applying through the association's organisational strength. But you understand the feeling in this room. You understand it because you've seen it on your father's face when Faye comes and they talk for 2 hours about the future that's coming. A feeling that is somewhere between fury and faith. The fury of people told they are lesser. The faith that this is ending. Faye appears at your shoulder. You see it, he says quietly. I see it, you say. Your father sees it too. This is why he gives his penny. Not for himself. Not even for you. Faye gestures at the room, at the 400 people and their held breath. For the day when Bridget grows up and the law treats her the same as anyone else. That's what the penny is. You think about Bridget. You think about her hand in yours at Smithfield, coal-black and small clean. When, you say. Faye considers this. He's not a man who makes promises about things he can't control. Soon, he says, sooner than anyone expected. He comes on a Thursday. You've been expecting him the way you expect January weather, not knowing the exact moment but knowing its shape, knowing what it brings. His name is Walsh. He collects for a man named Grogan, who owns your building and 4 others on Ash Lane. Walsh is small, neatly dressed, with a brown coat and a leather satchel, and the specific face of a person who has trained himself to exist entirely in the transactional layer of human interaction. He doesn't hate you. He doesn't like you. He processes you. The rent is 3 shillings and 6pence per quarter. In the better years, 3 and 6 was difficult but achievable. This quarter, you are 1 shilling and 2pence short. Your mother is at the door when Walsh comes, having heard him in the hallway below and positioned herself there. Mrs. Brennan, Walsh says. He looks at his ledger. 3 and 6. I have 2 and 4pence, your mother says. Walsh writes something. His pen makes small, precise marks without any urgency. When's the remainder coming? My husband will have work next week. Walsh looks up. He reads faces professionally. It's required by his job. He knows what my husband will have work next week means and what it doesn't mean. I'll note a partial payment, he says. The full quarter must be cleared by the 18th of February. Yes, your mother says, if it isn't cleared by the 18th. I know what happens if it isn't cleared, your mother says. Very quietly. The quietest she's said anything in weeks. Walsh pauses. Something in the quality of her quiet reaches even him. Not pity, he doesn't do pity, but acknowledgement. The acknowledgement of a person performing a function that isn't pleasant, who understands it isn't pleasant. There are rooms available at... No, she says. The rooms he's going to mention are smaller. One room, not two. Further from the Liberties, further from Fahey and the Association and Mrs. Kiernan and Mrs. Connolly's school and every connection this family has in this neighbourhood. No, she says again. He nods, makes a note, closes the ledger. The 18th, he says. Yes, she says. He goes down the stairs. You're standing behind the partition door. You've been there the whole time. Not hiding, not quite, but not in the room either. Your mother closes the door. She stands with her back to it. For a moment, 1 moment, 5 seconds at most, her face does something it almost never does. The controlled surface gives way to something underneath, something that lives near tears without being tears, something that looks like a person measuring the distance between where they are and where they'd have to go before things broke, and finding the distance smaller than they thought. Then she straightens. She goes to the fire, she checks the turf. She adds a small piece. We'll manage, she says. To the room, to the walls, to whoever is listening. We'll manage. You manage, not elegantly, not because of luck or some unexpected windfall. You manage by accumulation. You're 3 pennies from the coal yard, 4 mornings a week because Clark makes good on his offer and gives you regular work. Your mother's work with Mrs. Kiernan, 1 shilling and 6pence over 3 weeks. Your father, who on rare good mornings manages a day's work carding wool at a small workshop on Meath Street, not the loom, he can't manage the loom, but carding he can do seated for 6pence a day. By the 16th you have 3 shillings and 3 pence. By the 17th, after your mother sells a shawl, dark blue wool, one of the last things from her own mother, kept folded at the bottom of the box since she came to Dublin, you have 3 and 9. On the 18th, Walsh comes back. Your mother pays 3 and 6. He gives her change. 3 pennies. She holds them in her palm for a moment, then puts them in her pocket. Next quarter, she says. Next quarter, Walsh agrees. Sunday comes and your father is better. Not well, not the man he was 5 years ago, but better than the worst of January. He dressed this morning and walked to Mass at Francis Street and came back without assistance, which is enough to shift the whole household's atmosphere from something grey and frightening to something merely difficult. After Mass, over the remains of the bread that's Sunday dinner, he looks at you. Go out, he says. I'm fine here. You're not. The weaver's eyes, still precise. You've been in the coal yard 4 mornings. You've been running messages. You've been here when you're not working, watching us like we might disappear. Go out. Take Bridget. Go to the park. He means Phoenix Park, the great open park on the western edge of the city, 700 acres of crown land available to anyone who wants to walk in it. 2 miles from Ash Lane, across the river. Bridget appears in the doorway already wearing her coat. She has been listening. The walk takes 40 minutes. You cross the river at Bloody Bridge, narrow and wooden, slippery at the edges, the water brown and fast below you, and walk northwest through streets that thin out as you leave the city proper, buildings becoming smaller and more spread out, the smell of the city thinning behind you like a garment you're gradually shrugging off. Then the wall of the park, limestone, 8 feet tall, running for miles. You go in through the island bridge gate. The park opens in front of you and Bridget runs. She just runs immediately out into the open winter grassland because she's 8 years old and she's been in Ash Lane for weeks, and here is space. Actual space. More space than she can see the end of. And you watch her go and feel something that isn't quite jealousy, and isn't quite relief, and is maybe both. You walk. The park in January is mostly empty. A few families like yours. A group of soldiers exercising horses in the distance, the animals' breath rising in columns. The open grassland swept with wind that has nothing between it and you. The park doesn't smell of anything. This is so unusual, so genuinely surprising, that it takes you a full minute to understand what's missing. No coal smoke, no dye works, no Liffey, no accumulated breath of thousands of people living in close quarters. Just cold, clean, slightly damp grass and open air. You walk toward the higher ground in the south of the park, the gentle rise that gives you the view. 60 feet above the river level. Not dramatic, not a mountain, just enough. Dublin spreads out eastward below you. The river from here looks genuinely silver, the winter light hitting it at this angle, the distance softening the brown to something that reads as brightness, as movement. You can see the bridges, 3 of them from here, stone arches pale against the water. You can see the dome of the 4 courts rising over the North Quay. You can see the spire of Christ Church on the ridge south of the river, the ancient cathedral standing with the quiet permanence of something that has been there since the Normans built it, that has watched 8 centuries of the city change around it without appearing particularly surprised. You can see the smoke. Not a plume, 1,000 plumes, a constant emission from chimneys as workshops and tanneries, and the permanent low-burning fires of a city that runs on combustion. The smoke rises and the wind gathers it, and it becomes a second sky, lower and browner than the real one, a haze that hangs over the city like a second ceiling. Under that smoke are the Liberties, Ash Lane. Your 2 rooms, your father in the chair. You look at it for a long time. Here's the thing that's hard to explain about being 14 in a place like the Liberties in 1828. You have nothing to compare your life to except stories. Your father's stories of the better years, Faye's speeches about the future that's coming. You have no way of knowing whether this is a hard period in a story that will improve, or whether this is simply what your life is going to be. From up here, both possibilities are visible at the same time. The smoke is exactly the colour of despair. It's also exactly the colour of industry, of work, of the proof that under it there are people alive and moving and trying. Bridget appears beside you, out of breath, pink-cheeked, with dried grass in her hair. She looks at the city. "Can you see our house?" she says. "No, too small." She considers this. "Can you see our street?" "Not from here." She thinks about this for a moment. Then she looks at you. "Do you think Da's all right?" she says. Your father in the chair, his hands on his knees, the pauses between coughs. "Yeah," you say. "He's all right." She nods. She believes you. She's 8 and she chooses to believe you. And the choice is not stupidity, it's practical. She's choosing to believe you because she's in Phoenix Park on a Sunday, and the alternative costs too much today. You let her believe you. For a moment, looking at the smoke over the city, you let yourself believe you too. It happens on a Tuesday night in February. You're asleep when you hear it. Not just hear, feel it first, the way you feel things through the floor before they reach your ears. A vibration deep in the building, the sound of something below being wrong, then the smell, smoke, not turf smoke, something hotter, more complex, tar and old timber and something chemical underneath it, the smell of materials burning that weren't designed to burn, that are discovering burning for the first time and not handling it well. Then Bridget's hand on your arm. Seamus, Seamus. You're up before you're fully awake. The room is dark, but there's a light under the door to the main room. Orange and shifting, not the steady light of a candle. You open the door. The main room is full of smoke. Not on fire. The fire is below you. You'll piece this together later. It started in old Moroni's ground floor room where she's been keeping a brazier too close to the dry timber partition floor. But the smoke has come up through the gaps in the boards, through the staircase, and it's in your rooms now, thin but thickening, the kind of smoke that doesn't look like much but moves through lungs like fog moves through a town, silently and thoroughly. Your mother's already up. She has a candle and she's wrapping Bridget's coat around her, her movements fast and certain. "Da," you say. Da is standing. He's standing. He's gotten himself out of the bed, and he's standing in the doorway to the main room, and his face is doing something you haven't seen in months. Focused, functional. The face of a man who has decided that a thing needs to be done. "Stairs," he says. "You go to the window first. Pull the oilcloth off. It tears. It's old. It goes easily." Below you, the alley. 3rd floor, 25 feet. Not possible. "Up," you say. Your father looks at you. Up to the Quinlans on the 4th floor, then across to the back stairs. You know this building. You know its back stairs. Added in 1810 when the building was subdivided. A second staircase that exits into the yard behind the building, not into the alley where the fire is. You've never needed to use them, but you know they're there. Your father nods. You take Bridget by the hand and go into the stairwell. The smoke here is heavier. It rolls up the staircase with intention. Warm smoke pressing upward, and you can feel the heat from below rising through the stone, the building conducting its own bad news upward through every medium it has. You keep your hand on the wall. You count the stairs with your feet in the dark. 16 stairs between your floor and the next. 16 stairs you've climbed twice a day for 8 months and know the way you know your own hands. In the dark, in the smoke, your body knows them without your eyes. Bridget coughs once. Then she doesn't cry. She doesn't cry the whole time. At the top, the Quinlan's door is already open. Mr. Quinlan is there, a big red-haired man in his nightclothes with a candle, already moving as you come through. He knows the back stairs. He goes through his own room fast, and you go through after him. Your family threading through a stranger space in the middle of the night by the light of one candle. Down the back. Stairs. The door at the bottom sticks. It always sticks. You've heard Quinlan curse about it. The door that swells in wet weather and catches on the threshold. You hit it with your shoulder. Once. Twice. Your father is beside you, and on 3 you hit it together and it opens. Cold air. Cold air like a physical force rushing in, and you breathe it. Breathe it deeply. Fill your lungs with something that isn't smoke, and you're in the yard behind the building, small and dirty and full of broken boxes and one half of a cartwheel, and the yard is cold and dark and safe. Your family stands in the yard. Your father is shaking. The exertion has used things he doesn't have much of, but he's upright. He made it. From the alley side of the building you can hear other voices now. The building waking up, other families coming down, the neighbours organising themselves in the rapid and efficient way of people who know exactly what's at stake, who've thought about this in the abstract and are now doing it for real. The fire doesn't spread. They contain it. Buckets, pots, whatever people have, wielded by people who know that if this building goes, the next one goes with it. By morning the fire is out. Mrs. Moroney's room is a ruin of charred timber and wet ash. A hole burned through the floor, the walls stained black, but the walls hold, the stone walls hold. Mrs. Moroney is sitting on a box in the alley with someone's coat over her. She's not hurt. She's 76 years old and she is not hurt. You stand in the alley in bare feet on January cobblestones, not feeling your toes, and you look at your father sitting on the front step with your mother's hand rubbing small circles on his back. You pick Bridget up. She's too heavy for this, you both know it, but you pick her up anyway and she puts her arms around your neck and you stand there in the alley with the smoke still rising from the window above you and the cold pressing in from all directions. "We're all right," Bridget says into your neck. "Yeah," you say. She says it again, confirming it, the way your mother confirms things. "Yeah," you say, "we are." The building's repairable. This is the central fact that matters in the days after, the fact that everything else rests on. Mrs. Moroney's room is destroyed, but the damage stops there. The walls above are sound, the floors are sound, your rooms are smoky. They'll be smoky for a week. You'll wake each morning with the first breath tasting of February's fear, but they're intact. Your family is intact. The morning after the fire, your father comes into the main room and he sits in the chair, and he looks at the hearth where the fire has been relit. New turf, a donation from 3 different neighbours who appeared at the door that morning with armfuls and waved off any talk of repayment, and he's quiet for a long time. Then he says, "I would have gotten Bridget out." You look at him. I know what you think. That you were the one who knew the back stairs, that you were the one who thought of going up. He pauses. "I would have gotten her out regardless." You look at his hands on his knees, his cracked knuckles, his weaver's hands. "I know, Da," you say. You do know. You know that your father, in the chair, with the cough, and the months of diminishment, is still a person who would have gotten his daughter out of a burning building by whatever means necessary. The illness has taken things from him, but not that. Some things you can't take. "You did well," he says. "That's all." You sit down beside him in front of the fire, close enough to feel the turf's heat on your face, close enough to hear him breathe, a bit laboured, a bit catching, but steady. From the inner room, Bridget is reciting the alphabet. She does this every morning now, because Mrs. Connolly told her to practice. You can hear her voice, small and certain, going through the letters like she's checking them off one by one. A, B, C. Your mother is in the kitchen area. The clatter of iron on stone, the smell of oatmeal. D, E, F. The turf fire makes its small sound. Your father breathes. G-H-I. From outside, Francis Street is waking up. The cart is starting early. A dog somewhere. The first bells from a distant church. This is what holds. Not the building, which nearly burned. Not the rent, which is always 3 days ahead of what you have. Not the trade, which died before you were old enough to understand what it meant. The fire and the oatmeal and Bridget's alphabet and your father's breath. This room, this morning, this family. That's not nothing. In Dublin, in January in 1828, that's actually quite a lot. March comes the way March comes in Ireland. Not as spring exactly, but as a slight relenting of winter. The frost goes. The rain comes instead, because in Ireland there's always something, but rain is warmer than frost, and at least the pump on Francis Street works again. Your father starts coming to market with your mother on Thursdays. Not to work, not yet, just to come. To stand in Smithfield and nod at the vendors and feel the city moving around him. This is your mother's idea, executed through a single sentence. I need you to help me carry the basket tomorrow. Your father puts on his coat without argument. You watch them walk together toward the junction at the end of Ash Lane, your father with his careful gait, your mother beside him with the basket, and they look like the people they've always been. Ordinary people, a tradesman and his wife, people with lives and plans and the specific intelligence of experience. Clark offers you a regular position in the second week of March. Not a casual boy's work, a regular worker's work, guaranteed daily rate of 3p 6 mornings a week. It's not a trade. It's not the weaving, with its skill and its art and its pride. But it's consistent, and it's Clark who offers it, which means it's offered straight. You accept without bargaining, because some things you don't bargain with. Brennan, Clark calls you now, just your surname. The way he calls the older workers. By the second week of March, you've saved 4p beyond the household contribution. 4p that's entirely your own. No purpose yet determined, just yours. You think about what to do with it for 2 days. A book cost a shilling, unavailable. Better stockings cost 2p halfpenny, increasingly necessary, or you could give it to the Catholic Association. Your own penny to the rent plus 3 more. When Fay comes for the quarter's collection, you give him 4 pennies instead of 1. He looks at the coins in his palm. Your own, he says. My own, you say. He puts them in the leather pouch with the rest. Noted, he says, and he goes to the next door. There's a pattern to the evenings, now that the worst of winter has turned. Your father reads by the fire, sometimes aloud, a speech of O'Connell's, transcribed and circulated, his County Kilkenny vowel still present underneath 20 years of Dublin, giving the words a texture that you've come to associate with something important being said. Your mother sews, the endless small repairs that keep a family in clothes on minimal resources, a darning needle moving through wool with the rhythm of something that doesn't need to think about itself to work. Bridget does her letters, tongue at the corner of her mouth, working through the alphabet with the intensity of a person who has decided this matters. You sit in the 4th position in the room and you think, this is new, the deliberate thinking, not the anxious cataloguing of the coal yard mornings in the worst of winter, not the child's idle mind. Something more like assembly, putting pieces together into a picture you don't have words for yet. You're not the boy who arrived on Ash Lane in May, astonished by everything, losing himself on every errand, flinching at the gutters. You know that. You can feel the difference in your body, in the way you move through crowds without slowing down, in the weight of the scoop that you don't notice anymore because it's become the standard weight, the baseline, the thing the body has accepted as normal. But you're not fully what comes next either. You're something in between, something still being made. Listen to this, your father says from across the fire. You listen. Months will pass the way months do when you're working. The coal yard becomes your world 5 mornings a week, 6 after March. You learn its specific physics. the difference between Welsh coal and domestic turf, dense versus porous, the way you compensate for a heavy sack by adjusting your centre before the weight hits, the particular satisfaction of a perfectly packed sack that doesn't shift on your shoulder. Clark teaches you things without teaching you, by creating the conditions in which you figure them out yourself. You're not lifting with your knees, he says once in April. He says it and walks away. You lift with your knees. Your back stops aching. Summer comes. Dublin in summer is a different city, louder, faster, fuller, the streets running with life and with other things, the Liffey achieving its annual transformation into something you actively avoid thinking about downwind of. But summer means evening light that lasts until 9, and the park is full on Sundays, and the market on Thursdays runs until dusk. Your father doesn't recover to the point of working the loom again. He never will, though you don't know this yet. But he does recover to the point of managing small jobs, the carding work on good days, some bookkeeping for a neighbour's business, because your father's literacy is rare and has value if you know how to use it. Autumn comes. The leaves in Phoenix Park turn to brown and copper, and the specific gold of Irish autumn, that colour that seems to concentrate what little warmth the light offers. You and Bridget go on Sundays and you watch her run, and you think about the smoke over the city and what Faye said about soon. Winter comes again, your second winter on Ash Lane. This one is different from the first. Not easier, not warmer. The coal is still expensive and the fire still goes out and your father still coughs and Walsh still comes on Thursdays. But you know it now. You know its shape. You know which days the coal yard has extra work and which days it doesn't. You know how long the fire lasts on 3 sods versus 2. You know the shortcut through the Coombe to Smithfield that cuts 5 minutes off the walk. You know the sound of the building at night, which creak is wind, and which is the building settling, and which one, on the 3rd floor landing, means someone's out of bed at 2 in the morning for a reason. You know Mrs. Daly and Mrs. Talon and Mr. Quinlan and the 12-year-old from the coal yard whose name is Thomas, and who's been working Clark's yard for 2 years, and is saving for something he doesn't talk about yet. You know Faye's footstep on the stairs before he knocks. You know the city. In the spring of the year after, Faye comes to the door on a Tuesday morning with a newspaper. He holds it up without speaking. Your father is in the chair. He takes the paper. He reads it once. He reads it again. He reads it a 3rd time, the long careful reading of a man who wants to be certain he's understood what he's read. Then he folds it, slowly and precisely, the way you fold something you want to keep. He puts his hand flat on top of it, his cracked knuckle weaver's hand flat on the paper. That's all. The Catholic Relief Act. Royal assent given April 13th, 1829. Catholics can now sit in Parliament. Catholics can hold most public offices. The disqualifications that structured your father's world and his father's world, and every generation going back, they're gone. Not all the problems, not the rent, not the poverty, not the long structural inequality that will take decades more to address, and will never be fully addressed in your lifetime. But this thing Faye has been collecting pennies for, this thing O'Connell has been fighting for in courts and in Parliament and in the streets of every city in Ireland, the thing your father gives his penny for every month, even in the months when the penny is genuinely the difference between enough and not enough. This, you stand in the room and you watch your father's hand on the paper, and you don't say anything because there's nothing to say that the gesture doesn't already say better. But that's later. That's the year after, the spring after. Tonight, the tonight we've been living in, the tonight of January 1828, the real tonight, the cold and dark and coal dust tonight. Tonight you're on the straw mattress on the floor of the inner room. Your feet are cold. They're always cold at bedtime in January. You've learned to tuck them under you and wait for your own warmth to find them. It takes about 20 minutes, and you lie still and wait for it, because there's nothing else to do, and the waiting is its own kind of rest. Bridget is already asleep beside you. She sleeps the way she always sleeps, with absolute commitment, deeply and completely, as though sleep were a competition she's decided to win. Her breathing is slow and even. The back of her neck is visible above the blanket, warm-coloured in the dark. From the outer room, your parents' voices, not the words, just the sound. The call and response of two people who have been talking to each other for 20 years, who have built a language inside the ordinary language, who can have the whole conversation about tomorrow and the rent and Bridget's letters and what Faye said and what the spring might bring. All of it in the specific music of two voices that know each other. You listen to the sound of them. The fire is low. You can feel it through the floor planking. Not much warmth, but something, the ghost of warmth, the memory of the fire telling you the room is less cold than it could be. The city outside is doing what it always does at night, reduced but not absent. Somewhere across the Liberties a dog is insisting on something. Somewhere on the South Quay a cart is moving. Somewhere in a building 3 streets away a baby is awake and not happy about it. Dublin's nighttime voice. Lower than the day, rougher at the edges but unmistakably itself. You've been here 8 months. You're not the boy who arrived on Ash Lane in May, astonished by everything, tripping over gutters, getting lost on every third errand. That boy was you, but he feels distant now, like someone you heard about. You're not everything you'll be either. You know that. 14 is 14. There are things you can't do and don't understand and haven't learned yet. Clark teaches you something new every week, and every week you understand that there are more weeks of learning ahead. But you're something made out of this winter, out of the coal dust and the thin stirabout and the fire at 2 a.m. and Bridget's alphabet and the 400 people in Francis Street Church holding their breath for O'Connell's words, and your father's hand flat on the newspaper, and the custom house silver in the morning light, and the 5-year-old girl on the step who said grand and meant nothing of the sort. Something that wasn't here before, something that is here now. The sounds simplify. This happens when you're very tired, genuinely tired. The tired that comes from having carried things with your body and your mind all day. The sounds of the world begin to reduce to their elements. The cartwheel becomes rhythm. The dog becomes single tone. Your parents' voices become breath, become warmth, become something that's past language. The cut on your thumb has dried. The ache in your lower back is still there but moved into the register of things that are real but not urgent. The register of the body at the end of a day, releasing what it's been holding. Tomorrow will bring what tomorrow brings. Tomorrow Clark and the coal yard and the sack on your shoulder. Tomorrow your mother at Smithfield and Bridget at school, and your father in the chair and the fire to tend and whatever problem tomorrow is already decided to present, because in the Liberties there is always tomorrow's problem already waiting for you at the door. But that's tomorrow. This is now. This is the straw mattress and the thin blanket and Bridget's breathing and your father's low voice going quiet in the next room and the fire's last warmth finding its way through the floorboards. Warm enough, safe enough, here enough. You have a roof over your head and work that matters and people counting on you to be there tomorrow. You have your father's hand on the newspaper and Faye's penny in the leather pouch and the view from Phoenix Park and the custom house in the morning light, and Clark saying Brennan the way he says it to the older workers. That's more than a lot of people have. That's enough. The candle on the floor. You have no windowsill, so the candle lives on the floor. Gutters in the small cold breath from under the door. It gutters, settles, gutters once more. Goes out. Darkness. Complete and soft, the darkness of a room without light in a city that has very little light after midnight. The faint glow of whatever the clouds are doing with the moon somewhere beyond the oilcloth. Your own breathing first, then Bridget's. Then, through the wall, your mother's voice finishing a sentence, a silence. Then your father's voice, brief, and then nothing. The city, far away now, breathing. Dublin, the beautiful broken city. The city with the grandest doors in Europe and the worst gutters. The city that holds the custom house and holds the girl on the New Street step and holds your family in these 2 rooms and the 600,000 other people in their various rooms, all of them trying to get through tonight and reach tomorrow. The city that will hold you through this winter and the next one, not gently, not kindly, but hold you. You're part of it now. The coal dust in your skin says so. The 3 pennies say so. The way your feet know the broken cobbles of Ash Lane in the dark says so. 100 years will pass. Dublin will change in ways that your 14-year-old eyes would refuse to believe. The gutters will be cleaned, the buildings tended, some of them, many of them, the streets lit with a brightness that makes night navigable in ways you can't imagine from here. The fanlight doors will be photographed and written about and pointed to as examples of extraordinary beauty, which they are. The Liffey will be managed, tamed, somewhat less brown. Somewhat. The particular arithmetic that says 3 pennies for work and 1 penny loaf and 4 pence short of the rent, that daily algebra, that body knowledge of the edge, that will be mostly gone. Not entirely, not everywhere, but mostly. And people will still live here, still sleep in this city, still lie in their rooms at night listening to Dublin's nighttime voice coming through the walls. The distant car where the cart used to be, the different church bells, the different dog insisting on something in a different register, but a dog nevertheless. Someone's dog, someone's night. Some things don't change. The need for rest at the end of a long day doesn't change. The sound of a family breathing in the dark around you doesn't change. The feeling of enough warmth, enough safety, enough company. That feeling has been the same for as long as people have had rooms to sleep in, has been the same in this city for 1,000 years, will be the same 1,000 years from now. Let the darkness come, let sleep take you, the way it took Seamus Brennan in his room on Ash Lane on a January night in 1828, 14 years old and coal-dusted and aching and alive. Let the sounds recede. Let the cold at the edges of the blanket mean nothing, not tonight, just the warmth in the centre and Bridget's breathing and the far bells. Let the day close. You've earned this rest. Take it and dream whatever dreams may come. Good night.